Okay, today we are going to discuss what does the Torah say about going to zoos. There's a lot to discuss about animals in general, tremendous amount. You could discuss this and you could study the topic for a very long time, but specifically zoos. It's popular during Sukkot, Chol Hamoed. People go on trips to zoos. You have to know, is it even permissible? So where do you even look for this? So Rav Ovadia Yosef in the Shalos and Shuvas Yabia Omer in Chelik Daled or Chaim Simin Chof has length about this specific question about is it permissible to go to a zoo or is it in fact prohibited? And the majority of this response that he has over here, the majority of the real estate over here discusses is this a problem of idolatry, actually, from a lot of sources throughout the Gemara. And he basically differentiates between looking at images versus actually seeing the animals. So the images is a whole discussion in and of itself. It's very interesting because sometimes you see at certain exhibits, you see videos. Videos would probably not be in this category. But continuing in the tshuva, he says, "Hamestakel b'rbiyosav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu umevarach aleim berachas hariyah, kemo yishakaso bebrachos." Someone who looks at these animals when he goes to the zoo and he makes a special bracha. This is a discussion of itself. There's a special bracha, brachat Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, meshana habrius, that we're blessing God that He creates different types of creations or weird creations. So the Gemara says, Haroya pil v'koif v'kifuf, which we're going to have to discuss in and of itself. If you see an elephant, a monkey, or this animal kifuf, which is a major discussion what it is, you say this special bracha, Baruch Meshana Brius. And he specifies, you say it by with also mentioning Hashem's name, B'Shemu Malchus, as is discussed and is ruled in the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Reish Chafei Sivches. So Rav Ovadia Yosef says regarding that, Havada she'ein bazeh nindud iser. That certainly will not be prohibited. Okay, so now we know that going to the zoo to recite the special bracha is not prohibited. The question is it preferable? But why is it not prohibited? And we'll come back to is it preferable? Since you have the intention, since your intention is to look at the world that God created and to recite a bracha on that, so therefore that's definitely not prohibited. Similarly, he says, if you have the intention and you want to know for educational purposes different animals and their natures, their way that they act, etc., and the details of them, and to understand what the rabbis say about animals and their halachas, their relevant laws, that for sure is a great thing to do. You know, we should just point out over here, animals, it's in the Torah itself, it's in Chumash, it's in Mishnayos, it's all over the Torah, all over Shas. So there's a lot to learn from about that. And then he proceeds to quote the Chidah. And he says that the Chidah himself visited a zoo in London. Shebikar Bagan HaChayos Sheba London, and he saw Chayos Meshunos, all sorts of weird animals. Nesher Yafa, Ma'od, a very nice eagle. Shout out to eagles that the Chidah saw. That was 100 years old. Wow, 100-year-old eagle the Chidah saw. And he saw other types of Vodkama mini Chayos me America. He saw many American animals. Okay? And then, so that was the Chidah. Now, in the Sefer Ma'agel Tov Hashalim, he discusses length about this, and he says, "Tibachayos gufon lekulioma mishra shari." Says Rav Ovadia, for sure it is permissible to see such a sight. When we tokach yakir geduloso yisbaruch, you will recognize the greatness of Hashem. Kekosov, as the pasuk says, which it's very funny because right after we started going to zoos more, it happened to have been that I visited my grandparents' graves, which are next to each other, and I actually forgot about this from years ago, I haven't been there in years, on my grandmother's grave, on her monument, Matseva, it is written this pasuk, Ma Rabu Ma'asecha Hashem Kulon B'chach Masisa, which translates to mean how awesome are the acts and the creations of Hashem, then they're done with such wisdom. Because my grandmother liked nature a lot and animals and the like. Very interesting, right? And we have a story from the Chidah, and we see that this is okay. And then he says there's a difference between just images versus actually going there. And the difference is obvious when you're actually seeing an animal. Right? Hachilok poshet bein roya sura maisi yedei adam shenimshach libo achrei hatzir hamariv ayinu masiach daiso me'avodas Hashem. If you just see a picture of an animal, a very nice painted picture or the like, so that already you could be giving credit to the artist itself, and you're going to divert your mind that it was God. As opposed to if you see the actual animal, you know it's all God who was involved with this. So that's an interesting point over there. And that's the idea. This is the Chidah, and therefore he says that there's a difference between going to a zoo versus what I think it's called the bull riding, where you go and it's a whole show, and then you they hit each other and they fight each other and everything like that. That is not good. This already he's tangenting into the bull riding. That is definitely not preferable, and you should not do that. But going to the zoo where they don't do that, they're not harming the animals, right? There's something called sar balei chayim, paining animals, right? Causing pain to them. That's not what happens at zoos. It's not painful for animals. And it's not bittul Torah, he says. Name is a bittul Torah. You'll say, wait, I could learn Torah. No, it's not. And we're going to see more why it's not. Especially when you're doing this at a time when you're very tired from your learning and the like. This is really needed for learning a lot of times because we have throughout the Gemara, in Shulchan Aruch, in Midrashim, animals. So now you understand what you're actually learning about, right? Any profession, you can't just study the profession and from books. You have to see it firsthand. You could learn about open heart surgery all you want, but if you're not going to see a competent doctor who's practicing it and teaching you what to do, and you see it firsthand, you should not be performing open heart surgery, etc. It's the same thing over here. This is the way to possibly understand what the Torah is saying about these animals, and we're going to see more about that. And then he says that, look, if you're, we're talking about over here, now over here, the animals, right? So you're going, basically, the idea is it's educational purposes. You're not just like messing around. You're not doing it as a joke. It's for educational purposes, and it's okay. And then you have the Arugos Habosim over here, and they all quote this tshuva from the Arugos Habosim on this topic. He's actually talking about going to a circus. And he's talking about over here that if the whole thing is a joke and you're just messing around, you're doing it for entertaining purposes, right? That's already a different question. However, people who go to the zoo, they're going, okay, it's something different, and it's an activity, it's kosher, it's something that they could do, but it's really educational. If you think about it, you learn more about it. You learn more about what's going on over here. And then he quotes the Mahari Bruno, who says, is it permissible? This is talking about actually horse riding. Now, the horse riding back then was very different over here. It was to figure out which is the fastest horse so that they will know practically which one to use and to buy and to purchase. So he wants to say that that will be permissible. However, you could add in the missing words. Nowadays, the horse racing that goes on, not horse riding before, I didn't mean to say horse racing. Nowadays, the horse racing that goes on, and it's for money and gambling and all that. That is not something that is preferable, but I would definitely reference everyone to on the random playlist what we discuss about what does the Torah say about gambling. It probably wouldn't be completely prohibited for most people that they're just doing it. They have a primary job, they're doing it on the side, but it definitely wouldn't be preferable and something that a person should occupy his time with. But anyways, over here he says again, you are doing it to contemplate the creations of Hashem, and it will therefore be permissible. This is an important point that he says wrapping up this tshuva, and a lot of people, a lot of Svarim, they quote this Kav Hayashar, Perek Beis. I actually just looked it up a couple hours ago. The Kav Hayashar in that Perek over there, he's basically talking about what you need to guard your eyes so that it won't lead to something that could be inappropriate. And basically over there, in short, he mentions which isn't the main part of what he's discussing in that parak, but he mentions in short over there that you could look at animals, even if they're not kosher. However, don't look at them too long, just a little bit. The idea over here, he says Ayin Sham. I'll tell you what he says over there. Ayin Sham means look it up over there. I'll tell you what he says. He's worried about that you're going to look at it, and then that could lead to something inappropriate, such as Zera Levatala later on. Look, over here at this point of the tshuva, this is the proper place to quote what it says. If you open up in Even Ezer sections of the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Chaf Gimel, over there it says it's prohibited to watch animals when they are having relations with one another. So that's basically the idea over here. What it seems like is the major problem of looking at them too much with the animals that aren't kosher. If it's not going to be that, I don't know, maybe Kabbalistic reasons you could go into. I didn't really see such a problem with it, but this is something that a lot of people talk about, and now you know. So, anyways, it's very interesting because at the end he says we have many statements where in the Gemara itself where they talk about animals. For example, he quotes the Gemara in Eruvin Daf Kuf. One of the statements over there, if the Torah wouldn't have been given, we would have learned modesty from a cat. The cats are very modest. They bury their excrement, etc. Very modest creation. So you see that there's what to learn even from animals as well, and many, many, many other statements. And then he ends this tshuva by saying over here that there's a story from in the Sefer Leket Yosher he brings. This is actually the Truma Sadesh, and they quote that he never saw a lion in his entire life, and he went to see two lions that were brought there. So we have yet another story about seeing these creations. We see also by other great rabbis that they visited the zoo, and there's what to rely on, and that is the main halacha. Someone who's going to be stringent, not to go, he could be stringent for himself. But if someone asks the halacha question, can I go to the zoo? The answer is 100% yes. And you got to do it for the right reasons. You know Hashem with all ways. So this is a beautiful tshuva on this topic from Rav Avadia Yosef. Rav Avadia actually has another tshuva. By the way, before we start this, we should point out also that it is discussed in halacha. Sometimes, maybe most zoos you can't, but about riding animals on a horse. If it has a saddle, there's no problem. Without a saddle, it could halachically be an issue for a male. Female side saddle, fine. He has another tshuva, Rav Avadia Yosef, in the Yechava Das Chela Gimel in Siman Samach Vav, where he goes into this and he doesn't like you going to the bull riding situation, which we already alluded to. That is cruel. Sar Bali Chaim, that is not good. So that over there is going to be a problem. Sometimes they poke the animal so that it will act up and act more wild, and that is certainly not good. Now, there's an interesting point to point out. This doesn't apply to zoos, and I want to explain why. There's a Gemara in Brachos Daf Mem, and it's also discussed in Shulchan Aruch, comes up some in Kuf Samach Zayin, that it's prohibited for a person to eat before feeding his own animals. It's based on a pasuk. The Gemara says it. Look at the Gemara over there in Brachos on Mem on Aleph. A lot of times at the zoo, they have a genius thing. It's a petting zoo section, part of the zoo, and then they say you could pay money and then you could feed the animals yourself, which is kind of funny because they have to feed the animals themselves anyways, and they're just charging you to do it. But most zoos, if you're an experienced zoo goer, then you could actually buy the food for cheaper prices before you get in the zoo. Just get it off of Amazon, and you get it in much larger quantity and feed the animals. But anyways, notwithstanding that side point about how to be practically not get ripped off on animal food when that you're doing them a favor by feeding them anyways, that has nothing to do. You're allowed to eat before you feed the animals at the zoo because they're not yours. It's not your responsibility to feed them. The question is it a mitzvah by still feeding them? You could say that maybe it's a mitzvah, you're doing a good deed. It would be no worse than feeding anyone else in this world, even though that they already had food. You're helping them out. You're providing them with a pleasure. But in terms of if it's prohibited to eat beforehand, so then the answer would be no. Something else should be pointed out, which is a whole discussion of itself. You typically cannot recite a bracha and eat in the area where there's a petting zoo because it smells. But we will come back to that as well. There's a story over here that in the Gemara, you look at the Gemara in Bava Metzia on Pei Hey, you have to have mercy on animals over here. All right. Even if they are not pure, even on insects, don't just kill them for no reason. That's another discussion in Sar Balichaim. Killing animals, pests in the house, mice, that's permissible. If it's a nuisance, if it's bothering you, if it's causing issues, that's fine. But just to kill them, just to have a joke, just because it's easy to kill hundreds of ants that you see, that should not be done. These are creations of Hashem, and they're here for a reason. Leave them alone. And the pasuk says, "V'rachamav al kol ma'asav." You want to have mercy on all creations. And anyone who has mercy, God will have mercy on you. So therefore, you'll be safe from affliction. So therefore, you should be careful. There's a well-known responsa from the in the Shilos and Shuvas No de Yehuda Tanina Chiluk Yoredeya in Simin Yud. He discusses over there if it's permissible to go hunting. The answer is no. You're not allowed to hunt. That's cruel. Number one, it's also dangerous to you. That's something that Esav did. You can't hunt, and you can't eat the animal after you hunt it because by you shooting them, then there's no kosher shechita. So hunting is not a Jewish sport and is not something that we should be involved with. And the bull riding, he gives another shout out and he says, don't do it when they fight each other. You're Messiah, you're assisting those who sin, and that is not good. You should stay away from that. However, he ends the tshuva by saying, let's go back to zoos. When you go to a zoo and you're looking at the creations of Hashem, and you get affected from that as well when you look at them, like the pasuk says, "Ma'aru Masach Hashem," which we just quoted above, that already is a different story, and that will be totally fine. And then he quotes the Leket Yosher, which he quoted before, the Chumas Hadeshin, who went to see those lions. He never saw a lion, and they were brought to his city, and he said, I gotta go. It seems like he even went on Shabbos itself. The Chida also, he quotes yet again, and there we see from these stories and these rabbis who went that it is totally okay. He doesn't like going to cruel areas where the animals are involved and they're getting mistreated. That is not good. Over here is probably the point to say something very interesting. A lot of times you'll hear people saying, oh, but the animals are treated cruel in the zoo. Oh, they're limited to this confined space. Let me tell you a fact about zoos, which a lot of times these people don't know because they're not educated on the topic. They just think and they just say whatever they feel is the right thing, which that's not how it works. You have to have the facts first, and then your feelings could come after the facts, because a lot of times feelings are wrong and they have nothing to do with the facts and the actual halacha. First of all, statistically, animals in zoos, and you could look into this more, could depend on the animal, but they will probably live longer by being in the zoo versus just in the wild. And the reason is because they are treated perfectly. These people who watch the animals, they're professionals. Okay? This is what they do for their career. This is what their living is. They're professionals. And not only that, if there's a medical issue, for example, in teeth or anything in the like, they have special people who are able to fix those issues. If it would be in the wild, it would suffer and probably die because of it. So they actually live longer in the zoos, and a lot of time the area that there is, it's the perfect, exactly what they need. There was a whole discussion about certain very large sharks. I remember they can't go in aquariums because they need more space. They can't, like, I think it's the great white shark, if I'm not mistaken, right? We're tangenting to aquariums now, but they can't keep it in an aquarium because it needs a huge space and they just can't do it. They can't have it. So that obviously can't survive. A whale can't be kept in an aquarium. But any we don't have such large creatures that are on the land that can't survive. What are the largest creatures? Elephants, giraffes. They all survive perfectly in zoos. So that would be the response to that question. Anyways, this is the two responses from Rav Ovadia Yosef, and what he says about them. And there's actually one more tshuva that I chanced upon, but at the end over here, just look at what he says over here. He says, "V'lachein hadavar ba'urur shemitzvah lahodia barabim shalaleches makom." Okay, fine. That's talking about the other issues where they're doing cruel things to the animals. Okay, that is Rav Ovadia's tshuva. There's another tshuva in the Shilos and Tshuvas Lahoros Nasan in Chelik Dalid Simin Samaches. By Nasan, he says like this. He also discusses going to zoos, and he says over there, and listen to this. Sometimes when you look at these animals and fish, yesh l'pamim mishum mitzvah. Sometimes it's a mitzvah. Mitzvah. Who would have thought? Like Rashi says, you know, the Torah discusses that we should be able to distinguish between animals that are pure and impure, that are kosher and that aren't kosher. Guess what? Nowadays, it used to be that it was much more of a farm and agriculture type of society. That's what people did. They owned farms, they worked on farms. Nowadays, it's very rare. So most people never get a good look at this stuff. And if they do, it's only for a couple hours and that's it. So people don't know the difference between animals that are kosher or not. You go to the store, you go to the supermarket, and you buy it. Finished. You don't know the difference between the two. That's why it's a mitzvah. You see firsthand, you go and you analyze each animal. Why is this animal kosher? Why is this animal not kosher? And you figure it out. That is a mitzvah. You see it firsthand, like we said before with the open heart surgery. You can't compare reading about something versus seeing it firsthand. If Belsky's Zatzal was very into this, he got hands-on.
Who says it says it's a mitzvah?
This is the Lahoyros Nasan. He brings this. It's a mitzvah because you're able to differentiate between what is Torah and Tamar, what is kosher and what isn't kosher, and you become an expert in it. It's based on a Rashi in the Torah's Kohanim in Parsha Shmini. So that is something else to keep in mind. When you go to the zoo, don't just say, "Oh wow, that looks like a nice animal." Say, "Wow, what a beautiful creation of Hashem." Hashem. But guess what? This is why we're not allowed to eat it. You have to analyze it, figure it out. The Rambam, in his commentary to the Mishnayos, in his Mishnah Torah in Perek Aleph and Halachas Ma'achal Sisur, is opening up that section over there. Halach Aleph says it's a mitzvah's asay, it's a positive mitzvah in the Torah to know the simonim, to know why an animal is kosher or not. Why is this grasshopper? Is this grasshopper kosher? Do some people eat grasshoppers? Fish, fins, scales. What's kosher? What's not? What is a fin? What is a scale? Birds, chickens. Or domestic wild animals. Why is this kosher? Why is this not? Figure it out. So comes Lahoros Noson and says it's clear from this Rambam, it's implied that it's a mitzvah to know and to recognize what is going on over here. Even if you don't want to eat from it right now, you should just know it's Torah. Okay, maybe according to the Kesef Mishnah, it's only a mitzvah if you're going to eat it. Still, you see this concept and this idea having it in mind. And therefore, if you go to the zoo, you go to the aquarium in order to figure out what is permissible or not. Ika b'zeh mishum mitzvah, that's a mitzvah. V'kolze k'sheinu b'makom shehu begeder megara yitzhara b'nafshei. This is talking about if you're not going to invite your evil inclination in. AK, you got to know, how are people dressed there? That's why you got to figure out, when are you going? Don't go like everyone else in the summer. Go at a time when it's colder because there's going to be less lines, less people there. You're going to be able to move throughout the zoo faster. And then you're going to be able to properly analyze the situation. You don't need to worry about people being inappropriately dressed because no one's there. And if they are, they're all bundled up because it's winter. Now, I'm not saying you have to go in the winter, right? A lot of times you go on a weekday, even in the middle of the summer, it's fine. You'll have camps there, whatever. You have to know when to go. When it gets cooler out, etc., like now.
It's not
So
going to work
that,
in the warmer climates.
what'd you say?
Not going to work in the warmer
Right.
climates.
So during a weekday when no one is there, you could go then as well. Now, the truth of the matter is we have another 10 minutes remaining. As you could tell, I did some major research on this. I want to just discuss for a moment. I don't know if we're going to get it all in today. I would have loved to, but if you look in Siman Ayin Test, the halachas of feces, basically there's different types of animals that you're not allowed to say a bracha if you're by their feces. In short, there's different halachas with all the animals. If it smells, you cannot recite a bracha over there. You're not allowed to. According to everyone, it's a Piskei Teshuvos, he summarizes it a little bit. You can, if it's attached to your shoe, you got to get it off. You're not allowed to say a bracha over there if it smells. The question is if it doesn't smell. If it doesn't smell, so then in short, it is basically fine. If you're a distance of 4 amos, 8 feet away from where the feces is, it's fine. Also, if the feces has already been there for a couple of days and it already hardened, which doesn't smell anymore, that would also be permissible, and that would not be a issue in terms of the feces over there. That was something to discuss. The main topic to discuss, there's two main major topics over here, which is there's a special bracha of Meshana Habriyos, which is a main discussion. And the question is, when do you recite this bracha of Meshana Habriyos? Because you can't, in short, what you got to know, okay, is what we just saw in the Gemara. And here's the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Chaf Hey Sif Ches says that when you see certain animals, for example, the peel and the kof, which in English are going to be the elephant and the monkey. It's interesting he doesn't mention that third animal that the Gemara mentions. And there's a whole discussion as to why the Shulchan Aruch doesn't mention that animal. But nevertheless, specifically, these two animals are unique, the elephant and the monkey, and we have to figure out what is unique about an elephant and a monkey that you would recite this special bracha. You recite the bracha, says the Shulchan Aruch, Baruch ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam meshana habrios. Blessed are you, Hashem. Blessed are you, Hashem, our God, the King of the world, those who changes his creation. He makes a weird creation. What is different about the elephant and the monkey? We'll come back to that next session. We're not going to have time to get it all in now. But in short, when do you recite this bracha? Because if you're by the elephant and the monkey, guess what? A lot of times it smells. And we just said if it smells, it's going to be a problem. Really, on any animal, if it smells. So we have to figure that out. Usually, a lot of times the elephant is far away and it's not going to smell. But if you see that there's feces there, so then granted, it's going to be an issue. You have to walk to an area where you can no longer see it and smell it. That's basically the monkeys. A lot of times, if they just smell because they're animals, it's not a problem. It's only a problem the feces itself. Keep that in mind. So a lot of times also at zoos, what you have to worry about is the smells. You can't eat and drink and recite a bracha in a place where it smells. A lot of times the petting zoos smell terrible. Specifically by the children's area where you pet the animals, that it stinks. Where the barn is, etc. But from my experiences, 90% of the zoo did not smell. So that's what you got to keep in mind. Also, remember one time, uh, knew someone who got married, one of my friends in the Central Park Zoo. So the first question I asked is it going to smell where you are? And it didn't smell. It was fine. If you're not by the animals, it's not going to smell. It's not going to, so it was fine. There's an interesting question based on what we're learning also. And by the way, in the next session, tomorrow, we're going to tackle and go into a little bit more what's unique about the monkey and the elephant in particular, and the bracha of Mishan Habrios in general. I just want to quote one more idea and then talk about seals for a moment, which is there's a major discussion, as we just discussed. The main discussion today was what's the story with going to zoos in general. I would just like to quote a contemporary major rabbi, because a lot of times people don't realize this. If you look in the Orchos Rabbeinu, Chilik Aleph, on Amud Sad, on page Sadi Zayin, which is quoted in the Piskei Teshuvos and Siman Reish Chaf Hey, in footnote 144, the Stipler himself would actually bring his children, Rabbi Rabbi Yaakov Kanievsky, he himself would bring his children to the zoo to say this bracha, Meshana Brias. So that is something special. We're talking today about, the animals. You're making them do things that they don't want to do. You're causing pain to them. You're joking around with them. The question is, every single zoo and aquarium has seals. That's what I've noticed. They're a very popular attraction. They're perhaps because they're fun. You watch them, they do things, they go in the water, out of the water, they're big, There's not a shortage of them in the world. The question is it permissible to watch those shows? They do the shows with the seal, they make them do things and twirl around and do high five and wave to people and all that. Or is that a problem of what we are discussing over here in these chuvas? So I would assume it's not a problem because if you actually researched that specific uh, event in the zoo, so you'll notice that if you research it, that it's not just to put on a show. It's part of their own good, their own development, right? They do with certain animals. Sometimes they have to transfer animals. If an animal's sick, if the weather isn't good for an animal, most animals could handle, but some animals can't handle the weather. So they have to transfer them. Guess what? How are you going to transfer? For example, at the Bronx Zoo, they have a 500, 600 pound turtle. It's the second largest turtle in the world, only on remote islands halfway across the world, and they have a couple in the Bronx Zoo. How are you going to transfer that thing? Well, you could do it the hard way. You get like 10 people to lift the thing up, or you get a machine. Or you could train the animals in a way that gets them familiar with going from where they are to the cage that they're then going to be picked up by a machine and transferred to easily and the like. Or if you want them to cooperate, let's say, for example, they need medicine, or maybe you're going to give them a vaccine or something to protect them, or they need a treatment. You don't just want to necessarily tranquilize them. So what you do is that's what you do. You get them ready for it. So the SEALs, it's all part of the training and the idea over there. So that basically is a short presentation of what I have of what the Torah says about Jews about zoos. Um, you know, I'll be honest, what really got me into researching this is I have 4 kids and I gotta keep them entertained. And you want to do things. You don't always just want to go to a playground. You want to do things that are educational also. And we go all children's museums, we go all over. And we try not to break the bank if we don't need to, because zoos could be expensive. So we tried out the Bronx Zoo on a free Wednesday. And I said, wow, this is a big zoo. I remember it as a kid, I used to go. And I said, this is very good. And then we we said, wow, this is amazing. And then I looked on the website and I said, okay, there's all of these things I noticed when I was there that cost more money to do. So I looked on their website. I said, wow, $50 for a ticket is pretty pricey. We're a family of 6. I said, that's pretty pricey. Okay, kids under 3 are free still. It was pretty crowded Wednesday. It wasn't that bad. I was able to handle it. We went early. And I said, okay, but on Wednesday, it's $15 only. You could get unlimited, all the things that cost money. So I said, let's go again, and we'll do only the things that cost money. And they probably won't be so crowded because everyone's doing the free stuff, which I was right. Most of them weren't crowded, especially earlier in the day. You go at 10 o'clock, no one's there. I mean, not no one, but it's very open. You could get a lot done the first hour and a half, something that would take a lot longer with all the pedestrian traffic there. And we went, and I said, wow, this is a lot of fun. We were there for a long time. We did all the things that cost money, and this is very impressive. And to quote my wife, it's a different zoo when you do the things that actually cost money, which is true. I looked at the membership, it wasn't that bad. It was pretty good. And I said, you know what? Let's go for it. We did it. And it comes with also the Queen Zoo, Prospect Park Zoo in Brooklyn, and Central Park Zoo, which don't even come close to the Bronx Zoo. And I started getting more into it. And then, as I quoted before Rosh Hashanah, I said, let me visit the graves of my grandparents. And I went there and I saw my grandmother's grave. I forgot. It said, wow, Marabu Masach Hashem, how amazing are the creations of Hashem at this time during the whole thing. And I said, you know what? I'm going so much. Why don't I look into this more and all the halachas and everything? And I said to myself, okay, I'm going to look into it. And that's what I did. And that's why I got very into doing this. And I said, what's a better time than to present this information than Chol Hamoed when people go anyways to the zoos? And it is truly amazing. And you research, you study each of the animals you could study, each one. And this is no worse than what Rav Vigdor Miller Zatzal is very into. You go through Chovos Halavavos and his commentary on Chovos Halavavos, especially in Shar Bechina. He goes into so much medical. You know, it's amazing if you think about it and you study the body. Doctors could do this a lot. You know, it's something to think about how amazing Hashem is and how he made the body. You know, you a lot of times you say prove God's existence. Prove God's existence. Just look around the world. Do you know what it takes for your heart to function? You know what type of miraculous miracle that is? You know, people don't think about this. I just learned the other day. For a person to be able to go to the bathroom, their brain could cause a lower part of their body to react. Isn't that an amazing concept? No one thinks about this. So it's just an amazing thing if you start analyzing and studying and researching and learning more and more. It's truly amazing what you could get done. So basically tomorrow we will do for some of the session go through the bracha of Meshana Habrios, and then we're going to also discuss some very surprising and interesting halachas about monkeys. And if you think I left anything out, we could add that. But this is basically uh, the presentation. This is the good first one. I got out pretty much most of what was in my mind, and which is important. And this is basically the discussion. So tomorrow we'll discuss that a little bit more. Maybe do a little parsha as well. Any questions, comments on anything?
And tomorrow we'll deal with, I guess, the brachas that you'll make if you see other than if you do make other than an elephant or a monkey.
Yeah, and in general, just elephant and monkey, there's a lot of details about it that we need to see, and we'll learn more about other animals in the main also about this and why those animals would be different, what would be unique. We'll see some svarim that talk about that. You also have Parak Shira that talks about animals. Animals are everywhere, everywhere. So yeah.
And also, what we say about the shows, like they do with the animals, the fun they do with them,
So the
make
seal's
them do
fine because
tricks.
it's not really just to put on a show. It happens to be that it is a show, but it's part of their training, which is important for them also, and that they
They,
respond with the zookeepers properly.
and they do it with other animals as well. That's the
Yes,
aquarium.
yes, correct. And it's not painful, the zoo, and it's not Sar Bali
Yeah.
Chaim, them going to the zoo for the people who, the animal rights activists and all that. It's not. Yeah.
Okay.
Important to bring that up. Important to bring that up.
Okay.
All right. Hope you enjoyed.
Sure. So we're on Zoom tomorrow
Yeah,
also.
Zoom tomorrow because I'm in Baltimore now.
Got Okay.
All right.
Sounds
Good
good.
night.
All right. Good night. Good night.